Inside a flooded jungle, a tiny baby gorilla is drowning, and what saves him will shock the entire troop. No human dared enter that deadly torrent, but a golden figure suddenly emerged through the trees without hesitation. What this dog did next, and how 4 massive gorillas responded, became a legend whispered across the jungle. For days, dark, heavy clouds had hung above the dense jungle, suffocating the canopy with relentless cold rain. The trees swayed violently as rain hammered down without mercy, soaking every leaf in cold gray sheets. A peaceful stream that once whispered through the forest began to swell, transforming into something dark and dangerous. The gorilla troop sensed the danger early, retreating to higher ground beneath the towering ancient mahogany trees. But disaster struck in the blink of an eye, faster than any creature in the jungle could possibly react. A massive flash flood roared through the vegetation, turning the calm stream into a violent, muddy beast. Without warning, the riverbank collapsed with a thunderous crash beneath the impact of the surging brown water. A tiny baby gorilla was swept into the torrent before its mother could even reach out a hand. The little gorilla struggled helplessly, its small hands scratching at the foam as the river dragged him downstream. It bobbed like a cork in the murky water, vanishing beneath the surface and resurfacing with each violent wave. On the grassy riverbank nearby, the adult gorillas stood frozen in absolute terror and complete disbelief. The silverback let out a painful roar that echoed through the trees, deep and full of helpless agony. Even with his immense strength, he could hardly resist the destructive force of the rising muddy river. The baby was being relentlessly dragged towards certain death, swallowed deeper into the chaos of the storm. Then suddenly, a golden figure darted through the trees, a dog that seemed to come from absolutely nowhere. Without the slightest hesitation, it leaped into the churning water and disappeared completely beneath the foaming waves. For a heartbeat, nothing moved, and even the silverback froze, watching the river swallow another small life. Then the dog's golden head broke through the surface, gasping for air as it began a desperate search. It struggled to keep its head above water, fighting forward through a torrent filled with sharp, uprooted trees. Jagged gravel tumbled past, capable of crushing the dog to pieces in seconds if it lost its balance. It swam with all its strength, its eyes fixed firmly on the black fur floating just ahead in foam. The dog knew the river would soon turn sharply, entering a narrow canyon where pressure would double instantly. If it could not reach the baby before the canyon, both lives would surely be lost forever today. Overcoming countless obstacles, the dog broke through a thick swirl of mud and finally caught up to him. It reached the panicked baby gorilla and gently bit the back of his neck with extraordinary, careful precision. But the frightened baby struggled frantically, wrapping his small, powerful arms around the dog's head in pure panic. The dog was suddenly pushed underwater, and seconds stretched into eternity as bubbles rose to the surface above. Finally, its nose emerged again, gasping for precious air, while the current pulled them both downstream relentlessly. The dog quickly adjusted its posture, letting the baby climb onto its back like a tiny dark passenger. The baby's water-soaked thick fur was extremely heavy, weighing down the dog's exhausted limbs with every paddle. It pressed forward without daring to pause, every muscle burning, every breath a battle against the cold water. Ahead loomed a deadly section of river filled with sharp, jagged rocks, ready to tear flesh apart. The dog faced an impossible choice: surrender to the current or risk everything on a tiny, unstable sandbar. Resolutely, it chose the second path, summoning the very last drops of strength left inside its trembling body. The dog leaped toward the sandbar, its front paws clinging desperately to the muddy ground beneath the foam. It struggled with every ounce of energy to drag the heavy baby gorilla onto the shaking patch of land. They had narrowly escaped death, but now they were trapped in the middle of the deadly, raging river. The dog collapsed flat on the muddy sandbar, its chest heaving violently as it tried to regain its strength. The baby gorilla clung tightly to its golden back, trembling and letting out soft whimpers of pure fear. At this moment, the gorilla troop emerged slowly from the dense woods, following the riverbank in tense silence. 4 massive adult gorillas stood on the opposite bank, their presence filling the air with crushing heavy tension. The silverback was tall and sturdy, like a mountain of muscular black fur watching every movement carefully now, his gaze fixed firmly on the dog, ancient instincts colliding with something new and unfamiliar in his heart. In the wild, dogs are often seen as enemies or predators by gorillas defending their precious, vulnerable young. But this dog neither barked nor bared its teeth, showing absolutely no hostility toward the watching massive giants. It only lowered its body, keeping the trembling baby gorilla steadily protected between its tired golden paws. The sandbar was shrinking steadily as floodwaters kept rising, swallowing more muddy ground with every passing second. Soon, the entire patch of land would vanish completely, taking the dog and the baby down with it. Just then, the silverback took a resolute step forward, plunging directly into the deadly rushing water below him. The surging current crashed against his thick legs, but he stood firmly, like an ancient, unmoving mountain tree. The other gorillas remained on the bank, their wide eyes locked on their leader with breathless anticipation. The dog looked at the turbulent flood, then at the silverback, seemingly understanding the urgency of the situation. It gently nudged the baby gorilla with its nose, urging the little one to look at his waiting family. But the frightened baby buried his face deeper into the dog's golden fur and refused to look up. The silverback let out a deep rumble, not an angry roar, but a gentle, patient, and reassuring call. The dog slowly stood up, struggling to maintain balance on the rapidly shrinking patch of muddy, unstable ground. The river roared relentlessly around them. The sandbar collapsed further, and tension hung suffocating in the humid air. The silverback continued forward through the water, the rushing current rising gradually to his massive, powerful chest. With his enormous weight, he resisted the torrent that could easily sweep away small, fragile lives below him. Just as another large chunk of sandbar crashed into the water with a bang, he reached the edge. The dog carefully moved the baby to the highest point of the disappearing mud, eyes meeting the silverback's. The silverback slowly stretched out one huge rough hand, fingers wider than the dog's entire, trembling small body. No one could have expected that this seemingly ferocious beast would show such extreme and tender gentleness now. He gently picked up the baby gorilla with one arm, holding the little one tightly against his warm chest. The baby immediately let out a chirp of recognition, clinging desperately to the silverback's familiar, warm, dark fur. What happened next was nothing short of a true jungle miracle that none of the troop ever expected. The silverback did not turn and leave, but instead looked at the exhausted dog with quiet, glowing, grateful eyes. The dog still stood on a patch of mud, barely large enough for its four trembling, exhausted paws. The silverback leaned forward slightly, gently pressing his massive forehead against the dog's small, wet, golden head. It was a gesture full of deep gratitude and peace, recognized across two completely different, ancient, living worlds. But the sandbar was on the verge of disappearing, and the brave dog was still in mortal danger. The silverback slowly turned around, using his enormous body to block the surging current from the dog completely. Standing upstream like a living wall, he carved out a small patch of calm within the raging, deadly chaos. He gently snorted, and the dog instantly understood, leaping into the calm water and swimming toward the opposite bank. The silverback stood motionless until he saw the dog reach safety, then slowly waded back to his waiting troop. The dog watched the gorilla family vanish into green shadows, then quietly turned and disappeared into the deep woods. But somewhere in that jungle, a hidden bond was forming, and one day, these two souls would meet again. Love breaks all rules. Follow for more wild, heartfelt moments.